My husband always said the safe should only be opened after his death. When I finally did, I found old photos, a torn note, and something I never expected. Our only daughter looked at me and her face lost all color. Those words, which now echoed in my mind, were uttered by Chloe, my daughter, in a tone of panic I had never heard before. The scene was still vivid. Arthur's safe, my late husband's, opened for the first time, revealing secrets he had kept for decades. I, Madison, at 68 years old, thought I had seen it all. Losing Arthur 6 months ago was a devastating blow, but life had taught me to be resilient. However, nothing prepared me for what I was about to discover. If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, or if an unexpected revelation changed your perception of everything, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow this story. Arthur was a man of habit. Methodical, organized, predictable. Except for one detail. The small steel safe embedded in the wall of his office, behind a bookshelf. He always joked that it contained the secrets of the universe, or perhaps just the recipe for his famous chili. But the tone of his voice, a mix of seriousness and an enigmatic twinkle in his eyes, always made me believe the contents were much more than a joke. "Only open it after I'm gone, Mad," he once told me, with a melancholic smile. And only if it's absolutely necessary. The necessity arrived. 6 months of mourning gave me the clarity to start organizing his belongings. The office, untouched since his passing, was the last bastion of his memory. Finding the key was easy, hidden inside a poetry book he rarely read. The metallic click of the safe opening echoed in the silence of the house, a sound that seemed to announce a new era. Inside, there were no jewels, money, or important documents I didn't know about. There was a stack of old yellowed photographs, a torn note, and at the bottom a small object wrapped in silk. Curiosity overwhelmed me, and I began to unravel Arthur's mysteries, unaware that I was about to unearth a truth that would shake the foundations of our family. Arthur and I built a life that seemed straight out of a movie. We met in college in Boston, he an engineering student with a captivating smile, I an aspiring literature teacher. We married young, moved to a cozy house in the Atlanta suburbs, and soon after, our Chloe arrived, filling our days with laughter and unconditional love. Arthur was the pillar of our family, a man of integrity, dedicated to his work as an architect, and an exemplary father. He was always our safe harbor, the voice of reason, the comforting shoulder. I never imagined he could have secrets, much less secrets so well kept that they required a safe. My life with Arthur was one of complicity and trust. We shared everything, or so I thought. He was my best friend, my confidant, the man who made me feel safe and loved. Chloe, our only daughter, was the fruit of that love, a brilliant young woman, now 40, married with 2 children. She inherited Arthur's penetrating gaze and my passion for books. We were always a close-knit family, the kind neighbors pointed to as an example. The idea that Arthur could have a secret life was as absurd as the sun rising in the west. The photos in the safe were the first clues. They were old, black and white images of a woman I didn't recognize. Young, with dark hair and a melancholic smile, she held a baby. The date on the back of one of the photos read, Springfield, IL, 1980. Chloe was born in 1984. My heart began to pound faster. Who was that woman? And the baby? The torn note, carefully taped together, simply said, "Forgive me, Arthur." I had no choice. Take care of her. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. The silk-wrapped item was a small silver bracelet with a star-shaped charm. That safe, which I imagined contained tax documents or perhaps a stamp collection, was, in fact, a time capsule, a reliquary of a life Arthur had never shared with me. With each item I examined, the image of my husband, the man I thought I knew so well, began to distort, revealing layers of a hidden history I was about to uncover. The silver bracelet, the torn note, the photos of the unknown woman with the baby, all swirled in my head like a frantic carousel. The date 1980, 4 years before Chloe's birth, was an anomaly that could not be ignored. I remembered a period, early in our marriage, when Arthur spent a few months working on an architectural project in Springfield, Illinois. He said it was intense work, keeping him busy day and night. I naive believed him. Now a new and terrible possibility began to form in my mind. I decided I needed help to decipher that puzzle. I called Chloe, asking her to come home urgently. I didn't reveal the reason, just said it was something related to Arthur's belongings. When she arrived, with her usual radiant smile, I was already sitting on the sofa, with the items from the safe spread across the coffee table. "Mom, what is all this?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. I began to explain, my voice choked with emotion. I showed her the photos, the note, the bracelet. Chloe picked up the bracelet, examining the star charm with interest. "It's beautiful, Mom. But who is this woman? And the baby?" Her question, so innocent, hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't sure, but the resemblance between the baby in the photo and Chloe as a child was undeniable. The same large eyes, the same nose shape. It was then that with trembling hands I picked up the last item from the safe. It was a small envelope, no name, no date. Inside there was a birth certificate. The mother's name was the same as the woman in the photos. The father's name, Arthur Miller, and the baby's name, Chloe. My Chloe. The birth date, 1980. 4 years before the date I always believed to be our daughter's. Chloe took the certificate from my hands, her eyes scanning the words. Her smile vanished, replaced by an expression of shock and disbelief. "No, it can't be," she whispered, her face losing all color. The birth certificate, a piece of paper that should bring joy, was now proof of a betrayal, of a lie Arthur had kept our entire lives. My daughter, whom I loved unconditionally, was not who I thought she was, and I, the mother who always protected her, found myself facing a truth that threatened to destroy everything I believed to be real. The birth certificate for Chloe, dated 1980, lay on the coffee table, a piece of paper dismantling 40 years of a carefully constructed reality. Chloe, pale and wide-eyed, seemed to have aged a decade in seconds. "Mom, what does this mean?" Her voice was an almost inaudible whisper, laden with a pain that I, Madison, at 68, never wanted her to feel. I myself was in shock, feeling Arthur's betrayal like a sharp knife in my chest. The man I loved, my daughter's father, had lived a double life. "Chloe, I don't know," I managed to stammer, words caught in my throat. "I swear I knew nothing about this. To me, you were born in 1984, as we always knew." The confusion and hurt in her gaze were palpable. She picked up the photo of the unknown woman, then the certificate. "So who is this woman? And why is her name here as my mother and not yours?" Her question was a direct blow to my soul. The truth, cold and relentless, began to solidify. Chloe was not my biological daughter. She was Arthur's daughter with another woman, born 4 years before our marriage. The living room, once a refuge of memories, now seemed a stage for painful revelations. Chloe stood up abruptly, her eyes welling with tears. "So my whole life was a lie? You and Dad, you deceived me all these years?" The accusation, though understandable, deeply affected me. "No, Chloe, I didn't deceive you. I was deceived too. Your father, he hid this from me." But my words seemed empty in the face of the discovery's magnitude. Trust, the foundation of our family, was in ruins. That safe, which I imagined contained tax documents or perhaps a stamp collection, had become Pandora's box, unleashing a truth that threatened to destroy the present. Chloe's anger and pain were a whirlwind. She looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and resentment, as if I were complicit in Arthur's deception. "How can you say you didn't know, Mom? How could a mother not know that her daughter isn't hers?" Her voice, once broken, was now firm and accusatory. I, Madison, felt the weight of a guilt that wasn't mine, but that consumed me. "Chloe, when you were born, I was there. I loved you from the first moment. To me, you always were and always will be my daughter. Arthur and I got married in 1983. He told me you were our daughter, born prematurely in 1984. The explanation seemed fragile, even to me. How could I have been so blind? How did I not realize that the story of a premature birth, though plausible, didn't perfectly fit with our wedding date? Love, blind trust in Arthur, had prevented me from questioning. He made me believe we were a perfect family. Chloe, he made me believe you were our daughter, conceived and born of our love. But the truth was that Arthur had introduced Chloe to me as our daughter, a child who already existed, the fruit of a previous relationship. Chloe sat down again, her head in her hands. "So, who am I? Who is my real mother? And why did she abandon me?" Her questions echoed in the silence, unanswered. The torn note with the phrase, "Forgive me, Arthur." I had no choice. "Take care of her," seemed even crueler now. The woman in the photo, with the melancholic smile, was Chloe's biological mother. And Arthur, my Arthur, had assumed paternity and involved me in a lie that lasted our entire lives. That moment marked a deep rift between us. Chloe, my daughter, my companion, now saw me as part of a lie, and I, her mother, felt powerless to heal the wound Arthur had left. The need to find the truth about Chloe's biological mother became an urgency, a search for answers that might, perhaps, reconnect us. The night that followed the discovery was long and sleepless. Chloe locked herself in her old room, and I, Madison, wandered through the house, feeling the weight of Arthur's betrayal and my daughter's pain. The image of the woman in the photos, the date 1980, the name Springfield, Isle. Everything mingled in a tangle of unanswered questions. In the morning, Chloe came downstairs, her eyes swollen, but with a determination that reminded me of Arthur. "Mom, we need to find out who this woman is. We need to go to Springfield." I agreed without hesitation. That was the only path to truth, to healing. Together, we examined the few clues the safe had revealed. The woman's name on the birth certificate was Sarah Jenkins. A common name, but the city and year were starting points. We began an online search, sifting through public records, old directories, anything that could lead us to Sarah Jenkins, or any clue about what happened in 1980. The internet gave us some basic information. Sarah Jenkins, born in 1958, lived in Springfield, Illinois, in 1980. There were no records of marriage or other children. The search was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but with each small discovery, Chloe's hope rekindled, and so did mine. We decided that an online search wouldn't be enough. We needed to go to Springfield, retrace Arthur's steps, try to find someone who remembered Sarah Jenkins, or Arthur Miller, from that period. The drive from Atlanta to Springfield, Illinois was long and silent. The radio played old songs, but our thoughts were far away. Chloe, beside me, seemed like a stranger, a woman searching for a stolen identity. I, her mother, felt like a guide in unknown territory, trying to fix a mistake I didn't make. But that deeply affected me. We arrived in Springfield under a gray sky, the city seeming as melancholic as our hearts. The first stop was the city hall, in search of birth or marriage records from that era. With each step, each document consulted, we felt we were getting closer to a truth that could either free us or destroy us completely. In Springfield, Illinois, City Hall offered us little beyond generic public records. The name Sarah Jenkins was common, and information from that era was scarce. Frustration began to weigh on Chloe, who felt increasingly lost in her own story. "It's useless, Mom," she sighed, her shoulders slumped. It's as if she never existed, or as if Arthur erased all traces. I, Madison, felt her pain, but also a glimmer of hope. Arthur was meticulous. If he kept the certificate and photos, there was a reason. We decided to try a different approach. Instead of cold documents, we would seek out memories. We started visiting places Arthur frequented during his stay in Springfield. The old public library, a small coffee shop he mentioned in letters, even the park where he used to run. In each place, I tried to evoke the image of my young Arthur, with his easy smile and charming way, hoping someone would remember him. Chloe, in turn, observed people, looking for a trait, a resemblance, something that would connect her to the woman in the photo. It was in a small used bookstore, smelling of aged paper and coffee, that we found a clue. The owner, an elderly woman with white hair and glasses perched on her nose, seemed to have seen it all. When I described Arthur, she smiled. "Ah, the young architect from Boston. He used to come here, always with a poetry book in hand. And sometimes, a very beautiful young woman, Sarah, would come with him. She was an artist, she drew local landscapes. I remember she had a melancholic way about her, but her eyes sparkled when he looked at her. The lady gave us the address of an old art studio Sarah used to frequent. She was very talented, but she disappeared suddenly. I never saw her again." That small piece of information, coming from a stranger, rekindled Chloe's hope. The studio had been closed for years, but the address led us to an older neighborhood, with Victorian houses and well-kept gardens. With each step, we felt we were getting closer to the truth, but also to the unknown. The studio address led us to an old house, with a somewhat neglected garden, but with a nostalgic charm. The neighbor, an elderly lady watering her flowers, watched us with curiosity. When we asked about Sarah Jenkins, her eyes widened. "Sarah? She still lives here, but she doesn't receive visitors. She's been a bit reclusive since her son left." My heart pounded. Son, not daughter? Chloe's vision blurred, and I, Madison, felt the ground shake beneath my feet. Chloe's birth certificate, with Sarah Jenkins' name as mother and Arthur Miller as father, dated 1980, did not mention a boy. Something was wrong. The neighbor, noticing our shock, invited us in. "Sarah is sick, very sick. Perhaps she would like to see you." We entered the house, which was dark and filled with unfinished paintings. Sarah Jenkins, now a frail woman with white hair and deep-set eyes, sat in an armchair wrapped in a blanket. She looked at us with an expression of surprise and then recognition. "Arthur?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. I introduced myself and Chloe, explaining the reason for our visit. I showed her the photos, the note, and the birth certificate. Sarah took the certificate, her eyes scanning the name Chloe Miller. A tear rolled down her face. "Arthur, he was always a good man." She told us her story. In 1980, she and Arthur had a brief but intense romance. She became pregnant, but Arthur, young and ambitious, was not ready to be a father. He convinced her to give the baby up for adoption, promising he would take care of everything. Sarah, heartbroken, signed the papers. But Arthur, in an act of love and desperation, did not give the baby up for adoption. He took her to his sister, who had recently lost a child and desperately wanted one. Arthur's sister and her husband, who lived in another city, raised Chloe as their own. The birth certificate we found was the original, but Arthur had made a second one, with his own name and his sister's name, so Chloe would have a family. The woman in the photo with the baby was not Sarah, but Arthur's sister, and the torn note was from Sarah, asking for forgiveness for having given in to Arthur's pressure to give up the baby. Sarah Jenkins' revelation was a whirlwind of emotions. Chloe, my daughter, was not Sarah's daughter, but Arthur's sister's daughter. The birth certificate we found was the original, but Arthur, in an act of desperation and love, had created a new identity for Chloe, so she would have a family. The woman in the photos with the baby was not Sarah, but Arthur's sister, who raised her as her own daughter. The torn note, in Sarah's handwriting, was a plea for forgiveness to Arthur for having given in to the pressure to give up the baby. The story was much more complex than I, Madison, had imagined. Arthur had not betrayed me with Sarah. He had orchestrated a lie to protect Chloe, to give her a family. Chloe, upon hearing the full story, broke down in tears. They were not tears of anger, but of deep sadness and even greater confusion. "So I have two mothers?" she asked, her voice choked. "And my father, he did all this for me?" The truth was a tangle of love, lies, and sacrifices. Arthur, my husband, had been a complex man, capable of loving deeply, but also of lying to protect those he loved. Sarah, in turn, was a woman who had suffered the loss of a child, but who, on her deathbed, gave us the final piece of the puzzle. That day in Springfield, Chloe and I hugged, our tears mingling. The pain of Arthur's betrayal was still there, but now it was accompanied by a deeper understanding of his love. He had lied, yes, but he had lied to protect Chloe, to give her a life he believed was better. We returned home with our heads full of new information, and our hearts heavy, but also with a sense of clarity. Chloe decided to seek out Arthur's sister, her biological mother, to better understand her story. I, Madison, decided to forgive Arthur. He wasn't perfect, but his love for Chloe was undeniable. Life teaches us that truth is not always simple, and that love can manifest in unexpected ways. That safe, which once made me tremble with fear, was now a symbol of a story of love and sacrifice. Chloe, my daughter, was on a journey to reconnect with her origins, and I would be by her side, as I always had been. Family, I learned, is not just about blood, but about the bonds we build, the choices we make, and the love we share. And you, what would you do if you discovered such a deep secret in your family? Share your opinion in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the soul.